Long before our species spread across the world, another kind of human walked these same lands. They built fires, raised children, hunted massive Ice Age beasts, and survived in a world far harsher than anything we know today. They were Neanderthals, not the brutish caricatures once imagined, but a resilient, intelligent people who ruled Ice Age Europe for hundreds of thousands of years. And then, around 40,000 years ago, they were gone. Why? For years, theories pointed to a single cause, that modern humans wiped them out. But today, new evidence tells a different, more complex story. In this video, we'll uncover the final chapter of the Neanderthals, how they lived, how they struggled, how they met us, and what truly led to their disappearance, not in a single moment, but over a fading horizon of time. For hundreds of thousands of years, Neanderthals were not a dying people. They were survivors. They lived across Europe and parts of Western Asia, enduring some of the harshest environments the Ice Age could create. Stocky, strong, and highly adapted to the cold, they were physically built for survival. Their rib cages were wide to hold powerful lungs, their limbs compact to conserve heat, and their muscles dense from years of physical labor. This wasn't a frail population struggling at the edge of existence. At their peak, Neanderthals were thriving in the only world they had ever known. They hunted large Ice Age animals like mammoth, woolly rhinoceros, and steppe bison using close-range hunting techniques that required immense strength and coordination. Their stone tools were practical and efficient. They mastered fire, they built shelters, and they passed down knowledge through generations. They cared for their injured, as shown by skeletons that display healed fractures, evidence that those who could not hunt were still looked after. For tens of thousands of years, their lifestyle worked. It wasn't a story of constant hardship and desperation. It was a story of adaptation and long-term success. But around 40,000 years ago, the world around them began to change, subtly at first, then rapidly. Europe entered a period of intense climate instability. Instead of a steady Ice Age climate, temperatures began to swing unpredictably. Winters grew more severe, only to be followed by sudden warming periods that disrupted plant life and water sources. The land shifted under their feet, not physically but ecologically. Forests that once sheltered game thinned or disappeared. Grasslands moved. Rivers froze or dried at unusual times of year. The predictable patterns of the land, the ones their ancestors had followed for generations, no longer held true. And with these changes, the animals changed too. Herds of mammoth and bison altered their migration routes in search of new grazing land. The great hunts that Neanderthals once relied on became harder. Hunting was always dangerous, but now it became unreliable. A successful hunt meant survival, a failed one meant hunger. And as the environment shifted faster than their traditions could adapt, failure came more often. Slowly, the Neanderthal population began to shrink. Not in one dramatic collapse, but gradually, so gradually that no one living through it would have recognized it as a decline at all. Small family groups that once might have crossed paths now became isolated pockets, scattered across a Europe that felt wider and emptier than before. Most estimates suggest that toward the end, the total Neanderthal population may have fallen to just a few thousand individuals across the entire continent. Archaeological evidence paints a picture of a people fighting to maintain their way of life in a world that no longer supported it. Their diets shifted. Bones from late Neanderthal remains show signs of malnutrition and stress, particularly during childhood. Their teeth carry microscopic lines, growth interruptions caused by periods of famine or disease. In earlier times, these interruptions are rare. In later remains, they appear more frequently, suggesting that hunger had become a recurring part of life. We also see changes in their use of fire. Earlier in their history, Neanderthals burned dense, high-quality wood, carefully selected to last through cold nights. But toward the end, their fire pits begin to look different. Instead of solid wood, many contained small scraps, damp branches, even burned animal bones. Burning bone doesn't produce a strong flame. It produces a weak, smoky fire that gives off little heat. It's not something you use when wood is available. It's something you use when you're out of options. And through it all, the Neanderthals continue to do what they have always done: survive. But survival alone is no longer enough. The strategies that once sustained them for hundreds of thousands of years now work only just well enough to keep them going, but not well enough to allow recovery. They weren't wiped out in a single blow. They faded gradually as their world slipped out from under them. The land they once mastered began to move on without them, and in that slow divide between a people and their environment, the fate of the Neanderthals was sealed long before the last of them ever drew their final breath. Around 45,000 years ago, a new kind of human began to enter Europe: Homo sapiens, our own species. They did not arrive all at once, nor did they flood the continent in great numbers. They came gradually, moving northward from Africa and the Middle East, settling in areas that had once been Neanderthal strongholds. For the first time in hundreds of thousands of years, Neanderthals were no longer the only humans walking these lands. At first glance, the two species were not so different. Both used stone tools. Both hunted large animals. Both formed social groups and relied on cooperation to survive. But beneath these surface similarities, their ways of life were built on very different foundations, and those differences would shape the fate of the Neanderthals. Where Neanderthals lived in small, tightly knit bands, Homo sapiens formed larger, more connected networks. They traded materials across long distances, shared new techniques between distant groups, and adapted their tools quickly to suit changing conditions. A discovery made by one group of Homo sapiens could travel hundreds of kilometers through trade and social connections. A discovery made by a Neanderthal group, on the other hand, often died with them. Knowledge in Neanderthal culture was deep but localized, passed down within small family groups. Knowledge in Homo sapiens culture was shared and multiplied. Homo sapiens also had a different approach to mobility. Neanderthals worked within well-known territories, relying on intimate knowledge passed down through generations. Modern humans, however, were expansion-oriented, more comfortable pushing into new lands, adapting on the move rather than waiting for the land to return to familiar patterns. In a world that had become unstable and unpredictable, this flexibility gave Homo sapiens a quiet but significant advantage. Their tools reflected this adaptability. While Neanderthals continued to use robust, effective, but mostly traditional tool forms, Homo sapiens introduced lighter, more specialized tools, including projectiles that allowed them to hunt from a distance. This reduced risk and increased efficiency. They supplemented large game hunting with small animal trapping, fishing, and plant gathering, giving them a more varied diet that could handle fluctuations in the environment. As Homo sapiens entered Europe, there was likely no dramatic moment of first contact. It was more gradual. The two species would have seen one another not as equals in some grand narrative of human evolution, but simply as rival bands competing for the same resources. In some regions, they might have avoided one another. In others, they might have traded or observed from a distance. And yes, conflict was possible. Two hunting groups reaching the same valley, the same herd, the same stretch of river. Tension would have been inevitable. Some researchers imagine skirmishes, raids, or territorial disputes. But the archaeological record does not show evidence of a large-scale war or genocide. There are no battlefields, no mass graves bearing signs of extermination. And yet, even without war, Homo sapiens began to replace Neanderthals, not through direct killing, but through competition, flexibility, and numbers. With broader alliance networks, humans could recover from losses more easily. With varied food strategies, they could survive lean seasons without relying solely on large game. Their groups grew, their children survived in greater numbers, and slowly, they spread where Neanderthals could not. But this isn't only a story of replacement. There is another layer: interbreeding. Genetic evidence proves that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens had children together. Not once, but multiple times across different regions. Today, almost every person of non-African ancestry carries around 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. In a very real sense, Neanderthals did not simply vanish. Parts of them live on, not as a separate people, but within us. This genetic mixing wasn't a single event. It likely happened in small, scattered encounters. A Neanderthal band meeting a group of Homo sapiens, individuals forming bonds, children born with a mix of both lineages. Over time, those mixed offspring may have joined Homo sapiens communities, and in doing so, bit by bit, Neanderthals were absorbed into a larger population that continued to expand. So when we talk about the extinction of Neanderthals, it's important to understand this wasn't a clean ending. There was no final battle, no single moment where the last Neanderthal fell. Instead, their identity faded, slowly, generation by generation, until only scattered pockets remained. The last known Neanderthal populations are believed to have survived in isolated pockets, possibly in places like Gorham's Cave in Gibraltar, clinging to existence while modern humans spread further across the continent. In these final enclaves, cut off and surrounded by a world increasingly shaped by Homo sapiens, the last pure Neanderthal groups faded into silence. But their story doesn't end in disappearance. It ends in continuation, not as a separate people, but as part of us. Their DNA runs in our blood. Their adaptations live in our immune systems, in our skin, even in how we process sunlight. And their legacy, once dismissed as primitive, is now recognized as a story of resilience, intelligence, and survival against a world that changed faster than they could. The Neanderthals did not lose because they were weak. They lost because they could not adapt to the ever-changing world around them. The last Neanderthal didn't know they were the last. They didn't witness the closing of their chapter in human history. They simply lived as their ancestors had, until there were no more footsteps left to follow in the snow. So now you know what really happened to the Neanderthals. If you enjoyed, please like, leave a comment, and subscribe for more prehistoric videos.